Well, welcome everyone back to another episode of Through the Eyes of Survivors. So, today we're going to talk about healing. And healing is definitely not a straight road, it's a path with many turns and detours and crossroads. And for survivors of domestic violence and trauma, recovery rarely looks the same from one person to the next. Some find strength in faith based communities, and others take a more secular approach, or some are in therapy or creative practices, and many people actually do a combination of these. What's true across every journey is that healing is possible. There is no single right way to get there. So today take we're talking about like multiple pathways to recovery. The idea that there are many roads to healing, and as many roads as there are survivors out there, even. So we are joined by someone who not only lived that truth, but has made her mission to show others that they too can find their way forward. And Mary Beth O'Connor's life is a testimony that even after abuse, trauma, addiction, pain, recovery, and thriving is possible. So, we're going to talk to her and find out her story and the work she does today. It's going to remind us all that survivors deserve options, support, and most of all, hope. Welcome to Through the Eyes of Survivors.
Important notice: the following content may be triggering. Viewer discretion is advised. All discussions are based on personal opinions and experiences. If you or someone you know needs help, please reach out to a local support organization.
All right. So before we meet Mary Beth here, I just want to plug our affiliates real quick. Of course, our great affiliates, the Self Defense Keychain Store. We're proud to partner with them. They are a company that is women and minority owned and based, committed to empowering individuals with practical, discreet, and stylish self defense tools. By shopping through our affiliate link, you're not only investing in your personal safety, you're also supporting our mission to amplify survivor voices and to raise awareness about domestic violence. So use the code Break the Silence for your 10% off, and we appreciate that. Also, Opus Clips. We're proud to partner with them. They are an AI driven platform helping turn powerful podcast moments like you're watching today into short, impactful clips. And so, if you would like to turn your content into that kind of a powerful voice, then you can use our affiliate link for that. And lastly, Truth Finder. Truth Finder is a simple tool that helps you uncover public records and background information about people you may encounter in your life. Whether you're reconnecting with someone from your past or just want to ensure the people around you are trustworthy, Truth Finder provides you with the information you need to make informed decisions. And here at Through the Eyes of Survivors, I have used that myself, and we're all about creating that kind of a safe space and giving survivors the tools they need so you can reclaim your power. So please check out that link as well. It supports our podcast, and we're thank you for supporting our mission. So let's get into today's topic. We have this wonderful guest here today. Um, our guest is Mary Beth O'Connor. Mary Beth has been sober since 1994, but her recovery goes way beyond that. She's also in healing from abuse and trauma, PTSD, anxiety. Her memoir, From Junkie to Judge, one woman's triumph, over trauma and addiction. Those chronicles, her remarkable journey. So, um, She's also had essays that have been featured in the Wall Street Journal and the Los Angeles Times and Recovery Today. She serves as a director for She Recovers Foundation and LifeRing Secular Recovery, regarding regularly speaking about multiple and secular paths to recovery. She also builds bridges with organizations like Women for Sobriety and um, trains attorneys and medical professionals about substance abuse and disorder and recovery. Um, 6 years into her own recovery, she attended Berkeley Law, worked in large firms, litigated class actions for federal government, and in 19, I'm really dating you, 2014 was appointed a federal administrative law judge, and which is a position she held until her early retirement in 2020. And today, Mary Beth continues to be a voice of truth and hope for survivors and people in recovery. So, thank you, Mary Beth, for joining us today.
Well, thank you for having me. I really look forward to talking to your audience. I think it's just a great fit for me.
Well, I think so too. So, Mary Beth, you have an extraordinary story. Can you just take us back to the beginning of your journey and some of the struggles you faced?
Yeah, I mean, really, it was a challenge from the beginning. My mother was not really bonded to me. There was actually a major attachment disruption. I lived in a convent for the first 6 months of my life because she was an unmarried woman in 1961. This was like, a much bigger deal than it might be today.
Hmm.
But also, she just wasn't that focused on being a mom. And she could be violent at times, but things got much, much worse when she married my stepfather. And he was very violent with her. I think we sometimes underappreciate the impact of just witnessing parent on parent, violence, even if it doesn't happen to you directly. But he was also physically and sexually abusive to me, which is a very, very high stress household. And so that was sort of like the challenging start. But also later, I had some sexual assaults outside the home. I had a violent boyfriend for 2 years. So sort of I say it's a wide and deep trauma history. Yeah.
Yes, and that's the way it is for so many survivors out there. So, what were the turning points that helped you realize that you needed to go another direction?
Well, I mean, my first reaction what was the drugs, right? Which is also a very common. There's a very high percentage connection between childhood abuse, adverse childhood experiences. I'm sure you know all about those, and developing a substance use disorder, which is the medical name for addiction. So that's a strong connection. It's a common connection. My story's sort of not original in the child abuse leads to childhood addiction, but that was my first reaction was pain management, right? How do I handle this pain? I mean, I did try to do things in the household to sort of reduce my risk. Like for example, I taught my little sister that when we had to empty the dishwasher, like one of our chores, I taught her to put the dishes away one dish at a time so they didn't clack. Like that was sort of like the level of trying to not make noise or not trigger him. But there was that could only maybe reduce the risk. It couldn't get rid of it. And so for me, when I found my first drug, which was alcohol, it was when I was 12. What I noticed about it was how much better it made me feel. And
Right.
I think, we don't talk often enough about the drugs. In the beginning, they work. Okay, in the
Mhm.
beginning, they work. And it's sort of a two-pronged benefit, right? One is that it sort of pushes the pain away. Like it's more distance, it's more remote. But also, I remember sort of laughing and giggling with my girlfriend in sort of a more openly joyful way, which I wasn't able to do under the sort of the stress and strain. And so both sides of that coin were very attractive to me. And I pursued alcohol right away. And then I added in weed and pills. And I found my drug of choice when I was 16, which was methamphetamine. So my first reaction to the trauma was trying to manage my pain, and drugs seemed to be at the time the best solution that I found.
Yes, and that is so common, especially with early childhood trauma, I have found, to just try to relieve that pain you feel and put you in a place where you feel more euphoric and good about yourself. You feel more confident, usually, a lot of times, like you were saying in those moments. So, it's not an uncommon thing to happen. So as you look back, was there a moment that you thought I actually can build a new life, and what happened that created that for you?
Yeah, so I mean, I used drugs, to great excess until I was 32. So it was a really, long haul for me. And by 32, I was really in a, miserable, miserable place, right? I mean, my body's starting to show wear and tear signs. I'm feeling very trapped, very helpless. I couldn't hold a job. I had actually graduated college, but after that, I sort of worked my way down that corporate ladder because I couldn't get the work because I was using meth all the time. It was just miserable. And then my partner was ready to throw me out. And so it was sort of everything in combination that made me finally say, maybe I ought to go to rehab. But I will say, it's not like I went to rehab thinking I can get sober.
Right.
That wasn't the way I went to rehab, and I think that's most of us don't go that way, right? There's a common ambivalence. I didn't actually think sobriety was sort of an option on the table for me. I thought maybe I can figure out how to do less, like maybe I can figure out how to do better. Like that was as far as my imagination went. So I went there because my life was a shambles. I was in a lot of pain. I thought maybe I can figure out how to not live in this level of misery, this degree of misery. But I certainly didn't understand how wonderful and robust my future could be if I could get this under control. I learned that I over time. That took time to really even understand that it was possible, and then of course to do the work to make that possibility a reality.
Right, because you just started your journey on the basis, basically, of what I hear you saying is that I need to be able to function. I
Yes,
need
yes.
to be able to find a way to function, right?
Yes, to function and not be living in this kind of chaos and misery. I mean, and I always knew that my trauma was underneath the drug use. And so the reason I didn't really think I could get sober is because I didn't really believe I could heal from the trauma. Like I didn't know that that was a possibility. And so for me, when I went to rehab, and first of all, my rehab wasn't a great fit for me, for multiple reasons, which I'm happy to talk about. But I did start to get a little bit of therapy there. And then when I got home, I didn't just work on my sobriety when I got home from rehab. I found a therapist with trauma expertise and I started working with her. So I always knew that underneath the drugs was the trauma.
Mhm.
But it took me a while to understand that healing from both was possible. In fact, the recoveries for both sort of, there was an interplay of the recoveries, just like there was an interplay of developing the problem. And that took months, many months for me to start to sort of appreciate. And
Mhm.
then, and I think it's important I say that because the early recovery is hard work, whether it's sobriety recovery or trauma recovery. And it makes it easier to do the hard work if you believe there's a positive outcome, possibility for you at the end of it. And so part of talking is to let people know there is a positive outcome possibility if you do the healing work that you need. And that is something that I really took me a while to really fully absorb and appreciate.
Right. Well, and I think it is good to talk about the fact that the you may have multiple different um, type of recovery systems that you try, and you're not finding the right fit. That doesn't mean that you're not able to find hope or recovery, right?
Yeah, that's a good point. Like so from the sobriety side, when I went into my rehab, and this is in 93, my sobriety date's January of 94, but I went to rehab in August of 93 because like most of us, I didn't have perfect abstinence from day one. I used 3 times in my first 5 months, which was pretty darn good and a vast improvement. But my rehab was adamantly and vehemently 12-step only. And 12 steps is like Alcoholics Anonymous and Narcotics Anonymous and all of the Anonymouses. And 12 steps is a good fit for a lot of people, but it's also not a good fit for a lot of people. And it wasn't a good fit for me. And so I walked into a place where they swore to me, this is the only way, this is the only option. They told me repeatedly, do what we tell you or you're going to fail. Do 12 steps or you're going to fail. And it was a poor fit. And so I had to sort of decide, how am I going to handle this, right? Because I believe them because they're the experts. And so it is not uncommon that sometimes what we're offered isn't always going to be the best fit for us. And sometimes we have to do what I did, was sort of take ownership of our recovery. That I'm going to make sure I get what I need. I'm going to make sure that what's being offered to me, either I can modify it so it works, or I'm going to go out and find other options if this doesn't work. And that's sort of how I viewed it. I viewed it as, these people know more than I do, right? Because I'm new, but that doesn't mean that everything they say is going to be right for me. And so I always viewed myself as the decision maker. Like, it was my job to listen. It was my job to read the AA big book. It was my job to do all the homework and rehab. It was my job, to make best efforts. But that I always viewed myself as the decider as to sort of what strategies or techniques or ideas that I'm learning about do I think are a good fit for me, and let's apply those. And that is the same approach I took with my trauma recovery as well.
Right, right. Because I imagine that definitely the 12-step program is wonderful for a lot of people, but in my experience, what I've seen is that it's not for somebody who has intense trauma with PTSD and all of that back behind it. The programs sometimes are just not enough for someone who has that kind of deep trauma going on, correct?
They can be not enough, and sometimes there can be messages that aren't really trauma informed. Like, for example, and I don't say this as the 12-step program as a whole, but I know women who have had sponsors who ask them what was their part, like in domestic violence or some other abuse situation, and because they're not educated or trained, they don't have that training, and so that can be a danger. But you're right. I mean, sometimes women are better off, more comfortable in women only recovery spaces,
Yeah.
including in sobriety. And there's multiple options. 12 Step has women only meetings. And in my experience, those were more supportive. Like, there was a different type of understanding. There were some things women might talk about in that meeting, but not in the mixed meeting. But there's also specific recovery programs for women. There's Women for Sobriety, which is one of the groups I used in my early recovery. And then today, as you mentioned, I'm on the board for She Recovers Foundation. And She Recovers isn't just for sobriety recovery, it's for trauma recovery, for mental health like PTSD or anxiety or depression, or other behavioral disorders like, gambling or eating or sex. It's sort of anything that you're in recovery from, you can talk about in that one group, and She Recovers, rather than, in this meeting, I talk about my alcohol or my drugs. In this meeting, I talk about my sex. In this meeting, I talk about my food. And She Recovers, you can talk about all of it, because there is often an interplay in the problem and an interplay in the recovery. So there's a lot of options, even more today than when I got sober 31 years ago.
Right.
And also, they're easier to find because today there's Google. Like, when I was looking for options, I had to go to the library. Okay.
Yes.
And
Yes.
now and now there are meetings online. So even if those groups aren't in your town, you can participate online. So there's a lot more options for women today to try out and just see where you're most comfortable. Which one sort of speaks to you? Which one do you feel most bonded to the women, or do you feel most connected to the sort of the recovery approach? And all that's good news. The more options we have, the more people are going to find success.
Right, because what I hear you saying is like definitely like She Recovers has this broader approach, so it resonates more with a lot of people, correct?
Yes. And I mean, and a lot of people are there. I mean, even 20% of She Recovers don't even have a substance issue at all. They're only there for recovery from the other things. It's also reminds me of how we were talking about my trauma recovery, and you mentioned PTSD.
Mhm.
When I started trauma therapy, my therapist, to my surprise but correctly, diagnosed me with PTSD. I didn't know you could have PTSD if you weren't a war vet. Like, I
Yeah.
didn't even know that was a potential diagnosis. And she was right. And for me, it should have been very severe anxiety. Like, and I will say my sobriety recovery was much faster than my trauma recovery and my PTSD and anxiety recovery. That was more complicated and it took more time. But it's been a number of years now. I say today I'm 90 to 95% recovered, depending on the day. So I did a lot of work, but it was that sort of gradual improvement, right? Every month I'm a little better, every year I'm a little better, step by step. But first, I had to be properly diagnosed and understand what was really at the core of what was going on.
Right, exactly. Yes. You're also director with LifeRing Secular Recovery. So for the listeners who may not know what that is, can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, so we're peer support, like She Recovers and Women for Sobriety in 12 Steps. But we have a bit of a different philosophy. We believe in the individualized nature of the recovery plan. So we teach and that what I did is the right way to go for a lot of people. That people walk into recovery in different places and with different things to work on, and so your plan and my plan are going to be different. And that's how I viewed it. I mean, when I viewed myself as the decision maker and built a plan that I thought would help me, there wasn't even a name for it in 1994. But today we have names. What I did would be called an individual plan, a personal plan, or it would also the fact that I put different programs together, is more of a concurrent plan, which a lot more people do. So LifeRing focuses on how can we help you build a plan that will work for you. And we also don't we are secular in that we have no faith, no religion in meetings, but a lot of our members have personal religious or spiritual beliefs. They just like our self-empowerment approach better, and that's what we call it. We call it a self-empowered personal plan. So the goal is to help you do an analysis and think about what you need to work on, what strategies and techniques you think might work for you. And the group is there. We actually talk, like we share ideas in a conversation in a LifeRing meeting. So you
Mhm.
can say to the group, like, I'm going to my sister's wedding on Friday and there's going to be a lot of alcohol. Does anybody have any suggestions? And that's all they are, suggestions, right? So you can have a conversation and learn from others that sort of have dealt with that situation ahead of you. And so that's a good summary of what LifeRing is.
Yes, absolutely. We got a couple of questions, so we're going to hit those real quick. Jim says, "So recovery from trauma, addiction, or abuse is personal and specific to the individual and must be initiated by the individual when they reach the point they desire recovery. What about those who have truly given up on their ability to recover?"
Well, I'll say a couple things of that. One is that you know, there are ways that friends and family can help move the ball along. But, that old way in substance recovery about tough love, like I'm going to tell my family member, here's how you hurt me. You're going to go to this program that I picked for you, and you're going to do it today, or I'm cutting you off. Like that approach has very poor data. It has data. It doesn't, I mean, it works for some people. Everything works for somebody, right? But it doesn't work for most people.
Right.
But there is an approach called CRAFT. It's community reinforcement and family training. And those techniques, I think, would apply to the trauma side as well as the substance side. And that's really focused more on positive reinforcement and having honest conversations without getting emotionally entangled in the discussion. In other words, trying to have a calm conversation. What's going on for you? What's holding you back? What is your behavior, your problematic behavior, sort of doing for you? What need is it meeting? How we can help? And so there's that side of it. And then the other side I'll say is that I think sometimes we judge people for not recovering on our timetable when in reality they aren't always offered the resources that they need, like were they really offered treatment, sort of treatment that's right for them of an appropriate length, can they get access to it? For me, I did individual therapy, but then I did group therapy with women with trauma histories, which was like a whole nother level. And so sometimes people are sort of blamed when they're not really given access to the help that they need. And that's one thing sometimes friends and family can help with is if they're in such a bad place that they sort of don't have the focus to find the right fit for them. Sometimes friends and family can find all options for them, not telling them, but options. And
Yes.
that can be really helpful as well.
Yes, because I think that is a much better approach from what I have seen over the years as an advocate is if you can give them all the options
Mhm.
and just show a genuine loving concern of we see this isn't working for you. We want better for you, but we understand that you've got to do it your way, but I would love to give you some options. Then it works better.
Yeah, and I love it the way you phrase that. It's like we love you. It's hard for us to see you in this kind of pain. What can we do to help you? That's a very different attitude than I'm angry, I'm upset, I'm afraid, so I'm going to demand that you do something my way. That the way you phrase it is it's just a very different emotional context to have that conversation.
Yes, yes, it is. And I see it. Thank you, Amanda, for answering Laura's question. It's life ring secular recovery. So, yes, thank you. So we're going to take a pause here for a moment. We have a somatic virtual retreat coming up. We're going to give you some information on that here in a short video, and we'll be right back with Mary Beth.
Are you feeling completely drained, so tired of being on all the time, of constantly pushing through? That exhaustion is more than mental. Your body is holding on to stress as deep physical tension. It's time to give yourself permission to let go. Join our Rest and Restore virtual somatic healing retreat October 10th and 11th. Through guided breathwork, meditation, and EFT tapping, you'll learn to release what no longer serves you, all from the comfort of your home. As you heal, you'll also raise crucial funds for Break the Silence, supporting vital programs for domestic violence survivors. Find the details at the link in our bio. It's time to stop performing.
Okay, wonderful. So definitely look for that in October. I know it says it's 2 days, but actually you have options to attend either that Friday or Saturday, depending upon your schedule, or you can do both days. And it's being led by one of our volunteers and uh, Leah, and she's just fabulous. So we look forward to seeing you at that virtual retreat. So the links will also be in the descriptions and here in the comments. So please join us there. So we're back with Mary Beth, and we're talking about trauma and recovery and what that looks like. So um, I'd I'd like to ask you like next. Why do you think we talked about why people have options and stuff, but what about for someone who feels like isolated and discouraged? How can they begin to find the right kind of community?
Well, I will say it's one of the nice things about having online options because people can do it from their home, which is sort of like a lower level commitment than having to drive out and go somewhere. And it's also, you also can participate with these groups most of the time. For example, you're allowed to leave your camera off and just listen and not talk. And that can be a softer entry point for some people. Like She Recovers, we have 2 daily meetings. Plus, we have like some low, in-person meetings in different communities. We have yoga meetings, dance meetings, but it is not unusual for someone to just be listening in a She Recovers meeting and then deciding when do they want to raise their hand and try to share and get to know the women of the group. We also have a private Facebook page, and that can be a very good a place to sort of get a feel for the women who are sharing and commenting and sort of breaking the ice that way. So there can be sort of a lower level commitment or lower level sort of having to sort of fully engage with people like you might at a face-to-face meeting. That's one good way that I can think of that you can do it. And a lot of groups do have online meetings. So there's She Recovers is my example, but there are other options for people too.
Yes, absolutely. We have one question about is there more groups out there for human trafficking survivors? Yes, 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 there are definitely. And there's multiple ways to find them as well, right, Mary Beth? I know I've seen many on Facebook alone. So, what are your suggestions on looking for something that specific?
Yeah, I can't recall specific names, but I know like in Los Angeles, there's a group that does it. And I have a friend who has a history of that. And I know she's on a board for a group that's national. And so there definitely are support meetings, but also advocacy groups to try to get, say, the women treated in a fair way if they're arrested or if they, commit a crime. Sometimes a crime in the process of trying to get out or trying to escape or whatever it might be. Trying to get them the supportive resources so they can transition into a more stable life, that kind of thing. There definitely are organizations that do that, and I'm sure you can Google and look for them. So there's advocacy, and then there's sort of the more support oriented.
Yes, absolutely. And Kimber, Amanda will put here in the comments in a little bit our support line. It is a resource line, so you can call them and see if one of our people there can help you find more resources, more local, if that's what you're looking for. So you'll be able to utilize that. Yeah, you're very welcome. So awesome. Yeah. So, like we said, so there's so many different, even under abuse and stuff, there's so many different levels. Like we just saw here from, not just abuse and trauma, but even those who've been trafficked or the difference between those who've been sexually assaulted and stuff. So, you definitely have to find the right community that is right for you. So, please take the time to do that because you're worth it. You absolutely are.
One thing that reminds me of too is the in my book, one of the things that I tried to talk about was why I chose to live with an abusive man at one point in my early adulthood and how common that is, to try to explain to people how that happens. That I mean, for example, my abusive boyfriend was he had a history of family child abuse on him. In other words, we sort of had the same history. We there was an understanding, sort of a mutual seeing of each other and understanding what it's like to live in that environment that sort of bonded us to a certain degree. But also, he wasn't as bad as what I grew up with, and so for me, what might have seemed shocking to someone else wasn't as shocking to me. It was sort of within the norm, and there was that aspect to it. So it is one of the things that I try to use my book in part to show the why of it. Why does child abuse lead to many people to choose drugs? Why does having abuse in the household lead many of us to then choose a boyfriend who has violent tendencies? That kind of thing. I try to use my story as an educational tool without being super explicit about it. But there are sections where I do actually describe sort of some data points, about the statistics and that kind of thing. So I try to use my former judge title today as like an ear opener. It helps
Yeah.
people listen, and I can share information, and maybe they listen a little harder and absorb it a little better.
Right. And that memoir is called From Junkie to Judge, right?
Yes, and the subtitle, right? One woman's triumph, ladies, triumph for all of us is available over trauma and addiction. I wanted to make sure it was clear that it was both.
Mm-hmm. And what do you hope survivors will take away from that story if they read it?
I really want them to know that there is a way out. I mean, when I look, child physical abuse, child sexual abuse, sexual assaults outside the home, a violent boyfriend, and yet all of that, despite all of that, and 15 years spent in addiction, I was able to find a way to have not just a sober life, but a happy and robust life. I will say the best part of the healing for me, it's not like the judge thing. I mean, that's sort of a marker of the robustness of my healing. But for me, the joy of it all is that sort of the lack of chaos, the lack of obsession, the lack of that anxiety, the lack of really feeling as if my world was going to explode in my face any second, that sort of catastrophizing, that misery, that all consuming spinning anxiety. To get relief from that is like sort of the fundamental joy that leads to all of the other good things, and that just is a result of the hard trauma healing work.
Yes, absolutely. Because the thing that I think so many people out there, when they're in the middle of it, when they see you, or even when they see me and they think, oh, you're a judge, and I'm a CEO of this nonprofit and stuff. Um, we didn't always have these beautiful, wonderful, hopeful lives. We've had our fair share of trauma, and I would tell you, if I could do it, you can do it. There was nothing about me any more special than you. You're just as special as I am. Um,
Yeah.
that Yeah, because we I know personally, I'll speak from personally. I mean, there was a lot. There was a lot to overcome. And through different avenues, I was able to overcome that. But I had to take it at my own pace and with my own time. And um, I think the joy came in discovering myself through it, because I really didn't know who I was.
Mhm. Mhm.
So uh,
Yes.
yeah. And so, like, so many people carry shame and a heavy burden with that kind of thing. And so how do you encourage people to shift from that shame into a empowerment?
Yeah, I'll just in just 1 second. But I will also say, when I got sober and started my healing, I was 32. Like, I felt old. I had wasted my life. I had wasted my education. I thought like life could get this much better. Like, sure, it could get better, but I didn't really appreciate how much better it could get.
I
Um,
think life doesn't really start until you're in your 30s anyway. You really, the maturity that and the growth that comes along from your 30s, and now that I'm in my 50s, even I'm in the era of I really just don't care. I do me, you know. So, yeah, but back to the how do you encourage people to find empowerment?
Yeah, and so I think that for me that recovery process was a way of getting empowerment, because when you go out and get the help that you need, that is a fundamental self-empowerment decision, right? I mean, asking for the help you need and making sure you get it is the beginning of an empowerment process. It's saying, I've done the analysis. I realize here's where I am. And this is the help that I think I need to move forward. And I'm going to go get it. Like that's the
Mhm.
sort of the three-step process of everything in life. Do the analysis of where you are, do the analysis of what you want, and then set a plan to get there and implement it. That's everything. And so recovery from substances or trauma or whatever it might be, it can be a part of building up sort of your competence and your confidence to handle everything else, because you're taking ownership. Taking charge doesn't mean you're doing it alone, doesn't mean you've got to be isolated or sort of struggle through all by yourself. It means I am doing whatever I need to get the help that I need. And that can be part of the process. I think my recovery house, my rehab, they put my recovery at risk when they told me the lie that there was only one way. But in the long run, being forced to sort of grab ownership of my recovery from the beginning, to be making decisions about my recovery plan, in the long run, it actually strengthened me. And so that was helpful. And the other thing you mentioned was shame. And
Mhm.
I do want to mention, I did a piece recently. It's on my website about promiscuity and substance use and trauma, and about the connection between them, because I think a lot of women in recovery from traumatic childhoods, from sexual assaults, sometimes we choose to that promiscuous behavior, and a lot of times we feel shame when we get into recovery from it. and
Mhm.
and for me, I had very, very promiscuous history. And it's not that, look, if women choose to have multiple sex partners for their own volition, I support you. you know that's not what it was for me. For me, it was really a not valuing my body, not really understanding that I had the right to say who had access to it and who didn't. And being more focused on getting attention and getting access to drugs than on valuing my sort of bodily integrity. And I read a piece about that, because that's just one version of the shame that some of us walk into our recovery in, where we're judging ourselves harshly and unfairly, and not really being being as sympathetic to as we would be to another woman who goes through the same thing, as to where it came from and why we chose to do it.
Absolutely. And I thank the moderator for giving such a beautiful answer there to Kimber, but I would love for Mary Beth to just tackle that question as well a little bit that Kimber had asked here. If I can bring it moved on me here. I'm trying to bring it back out. Here we go. Do you think PTSD goes away after the abuse trauma completely?
Completely is a big word. I consider myself really 95% recovered, and my guess is that's about as recovered as I'm ever going to get. But the 95% is a vast difference. So for me, my PTSD, the primary way it showed up was anxiety, very severe anxiety, and a lot of that was about um, believing at a core level that no matter what I did, no matter my good efforts or what good was going on, something was going to go wrong tomorrow. Either I would make a tiny mistake or maybe no mistake, and something was going to explode and I would lose it. My husband used to call me the "what about tomorrow" girl. Okay, because no matter how things were today, my anxiety was through the roof because I didn't trust that it was going to last or that it was going to hold, and that interfered with me feeling my accomplishments, enjoying my life. I mean, it impacted me on every level. I spent hours stressing and thinking and planning, and it was awful. Gradually, with I was on anxiety meds for about 3 years, and then I tapered off. And I was in individual therapy for about 3 years with a trauma specialist, and then I was in a group therapy with women with trauma histories, which was like a whole nother less. And I will say today, um, I am rarely triggered like that. Myself out of it in an hour or two by, some of the cognitive behavioral therapy techniques, and possible to be at 100%. I'm not sure about that, but I can promise you it's possible to get to 95% because that's where I feel that I am. And that difference is massive. It's just massive.
Yes, I don't think any of us could get to 100% on anything. So to be at that level is really good. And it takes a lot of time. I
Yes.
know that. Yes, definitely. So don't give up on that in your recovery if you've just started your journey. So absolutely. When you look at your life now after that and all the obstacles, you're not only a survivor, but a judge and an author and an advocate. So, what do you think that says to survivors listening today? What's possible for them?
Yeah, I mean, I try to use that, shooting meth for for many years to judge as sort of like shorthand for how full and robust our recovery can be. And I will say it's a lot of it's about the small things. Like for example, I'm my partner who was ready to throw me out. I'm still with him. We've been together 41 years and we're happily married. And I will say that's the biggest surprise in my life because I
Yeah.
didn't think happy marriages existed on earth. Like I
Oh,
didn't know it
no.
was possible, right? And so to have that, it's been a surprise, but it's sort of also just a great joy and a great foundational support. But also to really enjoy my life and be happy overall with what I'm doing, to feel safe enough to take risks, to try the next new thing, or to handle my family in a sort of a more healthy and productive way. To my interpersonal skills when I got sober were terrible. For me to like be kind to, let's say, a customer service person who's frustrating me instead of screaming at her or being very disrespectful. All of these things are part of the sort of the new calm life. Mostly what will get me today is sort of there's like a family member or somebody's struggling or in trouble, like that'll cause me to have strong feelings. But generally speaking, my life is been able to structure over time in a way that I enjoy, a way that I feel challenged but not overwhelmed. And I will say, she recovers is also for overwork and perfectionism, which are
Oh, Lord. Yes.
common reactions, right? And for me, that overwork thing is big. I still struggle with it. My husband says I should look retirement up in the dictionary because I don't know what it means, but
Right.
but I'm much better. And so all of it is just about it's it's that not not spending my emotional energy, my brain energy, and my time in that feeling of chaos and stress and strain and fear just opens up a much more enjoyable, comfortable, happy life where I can actually enjoy my interactions, enjoy my work, and enjoy my fun times in a very different way than I ever was able to do before. So it's hard to explain how it filters into everything and sort of all aspects of your life.
Yes, absolutely. And for those watching, if you have any other questions for Mary Beth, we're getting close to end, so go ahead and put them in. That way we can answer those real quickly. So, Mary Beth, what else would you like our listeners to know about your journey and about recovery and just, in general?
I guess part of it, I guess I'd say sort of two primary words for me. I think were patience and persistence, right? I really think those are the key to actually getting long-term success. And I will emphasize, I didn't like it. Okay. I was 32 and I wanted to leap ahead. I wanted to like make up for lost time and for it to be like in a year, it would be like none of this ever happened and my life would be where it should have been. And it's not going to probably be that fast. But I also learned that if I would pause every once in a while and look back to my progress, that really helped me see it. Because I was always focused on my mistakes or my imperfections or the woulda, coulda, shouldas, or
Yes.
and so I had to actually teach myself to pause and say, okay, well, actually, in 6 months, you have made progress. In a year or 2 years, look where you've come, or look where you are today compared to any year ago, like whether it was from year 4 to 5 or year 5 to 6 or whatever. And so that helped me help me see my progress and success, but also help me feel more reassured that the future was going to be even better. Like I hadn't sort of reached the peak, I was still on that uphill climb. So those are some thoughts I try to put out there. I don't want them, yeah, like you said, to evaluate us today compared to where they are. This is 31 years later. It took a lot of work to get here, but even though it's can be not as fast as we like, it's still incrementally better. It's not a light switch. It's not horrible. And then at 10 years, it's a light switch. It's better. It is going to be improvement that if you pause and look, you're going to be able to see it and you're going to be able to notice it. And hopefully that will help reassure you that you're making the right choices, you're making the right decisions, and that you are moving forward in that positive direction.
Yes, absolutely. Because I have a board member who I love to death. Who she really believes in vision boards, right, and the power of them. And I have to say, I hadn't done one until recently, just because she had encouraged it so much. And I have to say that it had been a really helpful tool for me because it gives me this goal. I didn't even have a clue how powerful it would be, of where my next steps. It's the thought process of
Mhm.
what do I really want, and then being able to go back and kind of write out what would be my next steps for that future, right? And so um she would I keep trying to encourage her to do one of those for here on the podcast for her. Maybe one day we will, but um yeah, I encourage people. That was a really she really believes in them. So, and it's been a really powerful tool. So having that goal, and you could what you envision your life from one year can change to the next.
Yes.
And that comes with just the process of finding out where your strengths lie and where you are good during the process at that time.
Right. And what your priorities are, because those can change. I mean, when I got out of law school, I was 42 years old and I went and worked at a big law firm. That was sort of like, the top job to get. And I did it. But then I will say, but then at about 2.5 years, I thought, I actually am not enjoying my life with this job. Like it's taking up so many hours. I mean, I was working 60, 70 hours a week. 50 would be a good week. And
Mhm.
so, So my priorities had shifted. My first priority was try to get myself, back on the right road professionally, and this is part of it. And let's get the sort of the top tier job that I can get. But then it was like, okay, but that was good for then. But I don't want to live like this forever. So I'm allowed to make a new choice. I'm allowed to revisit this decision. It doesn't mean it was wrong at the time. It just means that I did not commit myself to life at this law firm, right? I'm allowed to make a new choice now as I see the pros and the cons and as my time of life changes or whatever. So most decisions that we make aren't permanent, commitments. We will evolve, we will change, our priorities will change. Sometimes we'll have a goal and we actually have to put it off because of something else going in our life, and that's okay. You can say, okay, that's my goal, but first I'm going to have to do this for 2 more years to whatever, get the money I need or the skill set that I need or whatever. So it's going to be a process, and it's not going to be one time. It's going to be iterative, and you'll do it repeatedly, and every step will be sort of a new adventure.
Yes, absolutely. Jim wants to know, uh, does the lifestyle you had led affect the way you think when you adjudicated cases on the bench as a judge? Is this a positive or negative when making decisions?
Yeah, so I mean I definitely saw a lot of people with similar histories to mine, people who clearly had histories of trauma in their life, mental health disorder histories, and or substance problems. And I think, I mean, there was law I had to apply, like this is the law.
Yeah.
But at the same time, it helped me, I think, interact with them in a more understanding way. In other words, in a less judgmental way. Like people, let's say that I saw that were really struggling with mental health issues that had that trauma history base. To me, it wasn't like, well, why haven't you gotten better? It was really coming from a place of understanding how hard that can be and how challenging, and trying to get the information I needed to make the legal decision I should make, but at the same time engage with them in a way that's respectful and understanding and not judgmental.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. So I guess wrap up. The last question I'd ask you is, if you were sitting face to face with a survivor who's just beginning their journey, what's the one thing you would want them to know?
That there definitely is, a way out for you. There definitely is a way to healing, and that healing will allow you to sort of get to the life that you want. I mean, that's what I said a little bit earlier. Is I think just having that hope is such a critical part of the process. It is going to be hard work, especially in the beginning, but the hard work will be worth it. You will get the benefit of that both emotionally and in really pretty much every area of your life. You'll be able to, if you heal and deal with that trauma, you'll be able to pick a better partner. You'll be able to find, pick a job that is more connected to your authentic self. You'll
Yeah.
be able to have friends that are actually supportive and engaging, and hobbies and activities. I mean, it's really going to help you make so many positive choices for the rest of your life, even though it is going to be a bit of hard work in the beginning.
Yes, absolutely. So one more time, your book and your website, please.
My book memoirs, From Junkie to Judge, One Woman's Triumph Over Trauma and Addiction, on Amazon and all the usual sites. And my website is junkietojudge.com. My opinion pieces are there, some other information, but also people can message me through my website. So if you have a question at any time or a speaking opportunity or whatever it may be, feel free to message me and I will answer you.
Awesome, great. And the link is put in the comments here as well, and it will be in the descriptions, so you can look for it there. So, in closing, definitely recovery isn't a single map, it's like a mosaic, I would say, of paths and practices and choices that you can kind of bond together and make a beautiful overall picture of healing. And what Mary Beth O'Connor here has shown us is that whether it's through community or secular approaches or personal practices, faith-based
Mhm.
organizations, survivors can find a way forward that works for them. And healing is definitely possible. You don't have to walk it alone. And if you're listening today and struggling, let's just remember you are not broken beyond repair. There is a path forward for you, and you deserve to find the one that fits your story. So, before we close out, I just want to be sure to take a moment to invite our listeners to get involved with us here at Break the Silence. We're currently looking for volunteers to help in two really important areas. First, in our Meta volunteers, these are people who are experienced with Meta and Facebook and Instagram, who can respond to comments and direct messages on our Facebook and Instagram pages. It may sound really simple, but actually it is powerful. I will tell you that's where I started in this organization 13 years ago, is doing that. So, because every reply, like every message, you are there to support a survivor so that they don't feel alone. So we would love for you to join the team. There will be a link to apply to be a volunteer. And the other volunteer position we're in desperate need of is podcast moderators for our live streams on YouTube and Facebook and LinkedIn. So moderators can help keep that chat safe and welcoming and supportive. Make sure comments and questions from our viewers are being answered, and you'd be right there in the moment to help amplify their voices. So if you're listening and wondering how you can make a difference, that's your chance. Give a little time and apply and help create a safe space for survivors here in real time. Signing up is easy. Apply on our website, and we'd love for you to join the team. Also, just a real quick to plug our Friday Survivor to Survivor segment. Every Friday at 5 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, I'll answer real questions from real survivors just like you. You can write in your questions at podcast at breakthesilenced, as in dog, .org. And don't miss our new series over on TikTok. We do have a TikTok. It's at BTSADV7. The new series is called The Narc Diaries, in which we read aloud from viewers' submissions what their narcissist said to them. And definitely follow us over there. And join us, because we're trying to get 1,000 subscribers over there so that we can do live discussion panels in which you could actually be a part. So join us over there. And until next time, stay informed and definitely stay connected, but most of all, stay empowered. Thank you for joining. We hope you're enjoying this episode of Through the Eyes of Survivors. We wanted to pause for a moment and let you know that Through the Eyes of Survivors has a shop now open. And this is a great way for you to not only help survivors of domestic violence, but also let everyone know that you will not be silent about this important cause. From t-shirts to bags to coffee mugs, we have so much to choose from. To grab your swag, head to our store at breakthesilencedv.org. That's store.breakthesilencedv.org. We can't say enough about how much we appreciate all that the community does to help support us and this organization. So we hope you've enjoyed this episode and continue to subscribe to future episodes. Thank you.